Hello everyone then, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21, and also a local group, which is an alliance, a coalition of voluntary groups trying to look at climate change and what we can do to address it, and also sustainability. And today we've got someone who individually is doing that in a big way, and it's Nicola Pill. Now, Nicola, I'm really pleased that she's joining us today because she has done a tremendous amount of work, particularly in Central America and Ecuador, where she's worked with indigenous communities who've been threatened by deforestation and by the oil companies. And so we're going to talk to her about that today, and also about whether one person can really make a difference, and she certainly has. So Nicola, thank you for joining us today, and it's great to have you here. Can I start by asking you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, hello, everybody. Well, I used to kind of call myself an environmentalist, but over the last few years, I've changed that to calling myself a solutionist, because actually I don't want to talk about the problems. There's so many problems in the world, and I think we really need to focus on the solutions. So that's really kind of been my thing and what can we do rather than what we can't do, and leading, in any way that I can, by example, to find those solutions. So really that's kind of my background. The last 20 years I've been working in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and I've initiated a number of different environmental and social projects there. So yes, that's kind of like a bit of overview of my quick history.
Well, I saw you called yourself a solutionist, and I wondered, did you make up that word? Is that something you created?
Well,
Because
funnily enough, originally I called myself, it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, a solutionologist. Because I was working with biologists and mycologists and geologists, and everybody else was an ologist apart from me. So I was like, well, hang on, I bring you lot all together, I coordinate you, so I need to be an ologist. And what's my speciality? Well, solutions. So therefore I must be a solutionologist. And I used that word for a while until actually I received an email, cease and desist using this word. A woman in America had patented the word solutionologist. And I kind of wrote back thinking it was a joke, because surely as many people as possible that are focusing on solutions is a good thing. And somebody did look into it and said, well, she may have patented it in America, but I am the first person in Europe to have used that word. And but then, to cut the word a bit shorter, solutionist seemed to be easier. And just recently I've heard other people calling themselves solutionists, and there's even a group of solutionists somewhere in America. So I'm very excited to hear that the tribe is growing.
okay, so you can be our, our solutionist today. And, the passion you have for finding focus-based solutions is amazing. Now, one of the people I know that you've been influenced by and who I found very inspiring was Polly Higgins, who died sadly only too young. And she was the one who fought for ecocide to be proclaimed a crime against humanity. How much did that influence you?
Polly was a dear friend and a great loss for, not just, personally as a friend, but the inspiring new ideas that she was bringing through. And it was a no-brainer. When we first met, we were speaking at a conference together, and I heard her talk, and it was just like, this is common sense. But, sadly, common sense is not common. But she'd hit the nail on the head. Yes, there needs to be, there needs to be structure, there needs to be change, there needs to be a law against what we're doing. So, the work of Ecocide and of, the grassroots movement of earth protectors, and still many, many environmentalists are not signed up to be an earth protector. So, it's really critical that these basic solutions that are all around us, people know about, and, we all kind of like all hands on deck, and the more people that get involved, the better. So yes, I mean, the work of Ecocide is absolutely critical as part of the thread in the tapestry.
And it's getting great traction now, which is really good to see. But you decided to concentrate a lot of your work in Ecuador. How did that happen?
Well, I used to live in Australia, and 20 years ago, I met the great John Seed, the deep ecologist. And he has an organization called the Rainforest Information Center, and they do great work all around the world. And they were looking for some crazy person that would live for 6 months in a remote lagoon to film the threatened pink river dolphins. And so I had no idea that, you know, the oil industry was in the Amazon, let alone drilling in lagoons in the middle of the Amazon. So that's really how I got involved. And I went down there on behalf of 5 international environmental organizations, including the UK-based Rainforest Concern. So this coalition of 5 environmental groups were working on the protection of the Panyacocha Reserve. So that's how I, you know, ended up going down there. And so after 6 months living in an amazing, you know, remote place, coming back out and seeing the effects of the oil industry. And then that was when I decided that I didn't know anything about it. And still a lot of people don't know about this drilling in the Amazon, which was when I decided to then make the film Blood of the Amazon and to kind of investigate it a bit more.
Well, you started working there, didn't you, with the indigenous people? Tell us a bit about the problems they faced.
So the main problem was Texaco that came in the 70s, started to drill. And I mean, 2 indigenous tribes were totally wiped out. They are no longer. And so the impacts, you know, have been obviously a massive ecocide and also an ethnocide as well. So yeah, it's been kind of shocking to see what's been happening down over there. So the people still, they always have drunk from the rivers and the streams. And so seeing that the reason that they were so sick, especially children, they say, in fact, it's one of the highest childhood leukemia rates in the world is amongst the indigenous children in the Amazon. And that is because of Chevron Texaco's legacy, which still to this day, there's over 1,000 toxic pits in the jungle. And these pits leak down into the people's water. So yeah, it's still going on. The pits still haven't been cleaned up. The people are still drinking the water. And unfortunately, the cancer rate is extremely high because of it. So, you know, that was, you know, how it's directly impacting the people is this legacy of oil drilling.
And the main culprit that you were sort of battling against was Occidental oil, wasn't it? And they were drilling in the ancestral homes. I mean, tell us about that battle and what the outcome was.
I mean, the 2 kind of main companies that were down there, say, were Texaco, that was taken over by Chevron, and Occidental Petroleum as well. So they were 2, you know, different oil companies working in that same region, you know, drilling. And I mean, Occidental were classic in, you know, this great image of how much they helped the people. And they provided health centers and they provided, you know, assistance. But actually the reality was, when I went out to visit the communities, that the health centers had no doctors or medicine. So yes, they built a nice building and it looked like they'd provided a health center, but it wasn't really a lot of good without any doctors or medicine. So I mean, this was the kind of thing that the oil industry would do to gloss it over, make sure it looked good in their magazines, what they were doing. I mean, Texaco actually told the people, because they were walking barefoot on oil that had been sprayed onto the roads, that it was good for them. That actually, well, you know, petroleum jelly, people still use it to today, that, you know, it was actually beneficial for you. So at no point were the people told that, you know, actually how dangerous it was to their health.
It was the, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the Yuba indigenous people that were affected, wasn't it? They referred to the oil as black gold, or they had a special name for it, Ruira, is that right? And so they realized the problem, but what did they do about it? And what frustrations did they sort of meet when they were trying to?
The Awa, they are really in Colombia, on the border of Colombia. And I met this tribal leader when he came to an indigenous meeting, which I attended in the jungle. And it was where all the indigenous nations had come together to support the Shuar and the Achwa, and it was their ancestral land that was actually being threatened. So the Awa were one of the groups that had come in to support the Shuar and the Achwa. And so at this meeting with over 500 indigenous nations were all there, they'd all walked through the jungle. And, amazingly, I got to go out there and witness this for 5 days. And so, yes, when I heard him say that, they believe that the oil is the blood of the earth, and this name they have for the blood is Ruira, it's like they have a real name and a concept for this, which was really why and how I based the name of the film Blood of the Amazon, of kind of like this realization that, yes, oil to them is the blood of the earth. And what are we doing, actually sucking it out.
So what impact did that film have? Did you have any indication of how well it was received?
I would say I was in Australia and I did a film tour there, which was great. And then kind of over the years, I was invited to show it in Portugal and all over the place. And I did go on tour. And so this was like really kind of going back 10 years now when I first brought the film out. And unfortunately, it's exactly the same story now. The film hasn't changed. It's exactly the same story. I did have to update the film a few years ago and change the ending of it. But yeah, it was well received and really shocking. And I would always ask an audience, and it would just shock me when there'd been a couple of hundred people in an audience, and I would say, can you please put your hands up? How many people in this room knew about this oil drilling in the Amazon? And this one time, 200 people, 4 people put their hands up. And many times I would show the film and nobody put their hands up. It's like nobody understands what's really happening on this planet. We drive around and we fly and we use the oil, but we don't really understand where it comes from and how it got to us. And so seeing it in this way that, the oil is also, it's not just an environmental impact. It has huge human impact, huge social impact on how it's affecting, the poorest people in society and the people that actually live where it's being drilled straight out of the ground.
And one of the impacts was on the air that children were breathing, wasn't it? And that was a real problem they had to face. And you helped some children take the government to court, didn't you? I mean, how did that happen and what was the outcome of that?
Well, it's the same lawyer, Pablo Fajardo, who was representing the 30,000 indigenous people against Chevron Texaco. So this same lawyer who spent, decades in this ridiculously massive fight against Chevron Texaco to get them to clean up these pits and to basically remediate and remunerate the people that have been affected. Although that case was won, and of course we all celebrated, Chevron, who've taken over Texaco, appealed and appealed and appealed, and basically still have not paid up what they were ordered to pay. So it still continues. And Pablo then just last year, the end of last year, representing these young girls and, these 7 young girls whose all of their mothers have cancer. It's very likely that though they will have cancer, 3 out of 4 people that get cancer in the Amazon are women. And that's generally because women are more in touch with the water. They're washing the clothes, they're washing the dishes. So because they're in touch with the contaminated water, the women are much more affected. Hence why it was these young girls that, stood up. And so Pablo representing them, they took the government to court and the Environment Agency to court because there's over 400 huge gas flares. And although we have gas flares here, anywhere, if you see like the oil industry in the UK, you'll see a small controlled flare. But there it's not controlled. So they're like these huge Bunsen burners really close to people's houses. Sometimes the flame goes out. So it's just pure gas that's being emitted. Obviously, the rain then carries this. And they're all breathing it. Their crops are, being affected by it. So the case was to have the government to, turn off these flares. And the madness is, why are they not collecting the gas? Because everybody cooks on gas and they ship in their gas from Colombia whilst Ecuador burns all their gas, because the infrastructure to actually build and to save gas costs so much that they don't want to build the infrastructure. So it's just easier to burn it off. But there must be some regulations, which, at the moment, you just sometimes see these huge black smoke, it's just absolutely terrible. And the girls have won. So it was very exciting to hear just recently that the case had been won. So my small part was just that Pablo asked me, would I speak as part of the, in the court case, which of course I did, which I could speak on my 20 years history of working in that area and why I support the girls. And it was actually my very last day in the Amazon after 20 years of working there. And I spoke up and all the oil industry was there. And then actually when they came to do their testimonials, they totally lied about me. So from the back of the courtroom, I kind of called out the truth and was then escorted out by police. So, I was in contempt of court because I spoke out. But there was no way I was going to allow the oil industry to blatantly lie about me and not speak up. So, yes, that was the end of that case. But I managed, as I was being escorted out by the police, I managed to get lots more information in as I kind of shouted from the back of the courtroom. So the judge was looking very wide-eyed. And so, yes, that was the end of that trial.
But many people have tried to misrepresent you, haven't they? They've called you an anarchist, a tree sitter, a sprout-loving idealist, a hippie, all of those things.
Oh, really? Oh, I haven't heard of some of them.
Well, I've seen it on the web. People have said that about you. But, you're not. I mean, you are what you said, a solutionologist, if I can say the word. And you don't just need protest, do you? You actually have done a lot of positive things. I mean, one thing I read is that you use mediation in order to help people who are in the rainforests. Can you tell us what that is about?
Microremediation is the use of fungi to remediate contaminated soil or water. So that I brought together a team of scientists from around the world that have been working on microremediation to the Amazon to say, okay, this great work, which started with Paul Stamets on the work of remediation, but let's take it out into the field where the real contamination is. A lot of this has all just been done in very controlled situations, in lab situations, but we needed to show that we can actually remediate this contaminated land. So, Stamets did a very good test once using different kinds of remediation on, it was a Department of Transport site where they had a spill. And so they use chemical remediation, they use bacterial remediation, and they also use mycoremediation with fungi. And out of all of them, the mycoremediation was the most effective. And the reason being that fungus, mushrooms' jobs is to break down carbon. That's what they do in the forest. They break down little sticks and twigs and wood. And oil is a hydrocarbon. So it's able, the mushrooms, the enzymes that the mushrooms create, those enzymes wash down and actually separate the bond, the molecular bond between hydrogen and carbon. Once that's broken, you no longer have the contaminant. So that's what we were working on. And I made a short video, Solution to the Pollution, about that work with mycoremediation.
And is that where alley cropping also comes in? Is that a part of the solution of tackling the soil?
No, that's a totally different project, which I initiated. The mycoremediation was really to do with, we have this massive amount of contamination and nobody is looking at how we're going to clean it up. We've got to, although it's a huge, you're looking at, say, nearly 1,000 pits the size of Olympic-sized swimming pools. And so it's a big problem. And how are we ever going to clean this up? So I wanted to kind of show that if we could just do it on a small scale, and we started to work around one pit. But of course, as it's part of the trial, we were not allowed to, mess with this contaminated land. We had to leave it as it was. But we were totally able to show how successful it was in small scale there in the area. But coming on to the alley cropping, which is another brilliant solution, I was contacted 7 years ago by Rainforest Saver and in London, and they have been working in Honduras and Cameroon. And they said they wanted to work in the Amazon. Could I help them? So it's like, yeah, I looked into it. And the work of agroforestry or of alley cropping is using one specific kind of tree, the Inga tree. And to start with, I thought, well, hang on, this is kind of a monoculture, just using one tree, and you just put them in alleys. But as I learned about why do we use that one tree, and we use it because it's the best tree for the job. It's native, it grows really quickly, it's nitrogen fixing, it has big leaves which break down into biomass, and it basically regenerates soil. So another problem that we have is deforestation. And a lot of that is driven by slash and burn. So the farmers are looking for fertile soil. So they'll cut the forest down, they'll burn it, and then for a couple of years, they'll have nice fertile soil. And then the rains come, there's no roots left, all of the earth is washed into the rivers. So they then, every 3 years, slash and burn a bit more. And again, looking for this fertile soil. So this method of alley cropping means that you grow 4 meters wide by 1 meter between each tree, alleys. And then every year and a half, they get pollarded. So the first job of the alley is to kill all the grass. It creates these dense tunnels. So all that hard grass that's grown up, that's then shaded and killed. The trees are pollarded. All of that leaf matter rots down in the middle of the alley and creates fertile soil. The big wood is taken away. In Africa, it's used for cooking. Save them going and taking more forest to cook with our pollarded wood. And in the Amazon, we turn it into biochar. So, it's absolutely, brilliant, the success that we've been having with the comparison of the food grown between the alleys has been amazing.
I mean, you mentioned deforestation, and that's a real problem. But you're an advocate, aren't you, on the natural growing of trees, almost what you call rewilding? Because so many people over here say, let's plant a tree in another country, which might get burnt down quite quickly. But the natural way of doing it is one way that you've advocated. Am I right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think rewilding is a no-brainer, really. But one of the things that I've been speaking out against is actually tree planting. I know it's crazy as an environmentalist. Of course, on one side, yes, we need to plant trees, absolutely. But why are we planting little tiny saplings whilst huge ancient forests are being cut down? Surely we need to first protect what we have before we do any tree planting. So the money that is being used for carbon offsetting, there needs to be a priority that these key biodiversity areas, the gems of our planet, which every day are being cut down because poverty is driving deforestation. People, they tell me all the time, yes, we need food and medicine, but we want to send our kids to school. And how do you argue with that? Deforestation is not just like big companies having cattle and soya. It's small farmers just wanting to survive. So we need to support those farmers. And so first of all, by finding a mechanism to pay farmers to be the guardians of the forest, to collect the seeds from the native trees, and to then grow trees to expand already primary forest, not growing 1,000 trees in a football field in the middle of nowhere. It's like there's a real way of rewilding and to, looking at, first of all, protecting vital habitats.
You've also been involved with other things as well. I mean, that campaign, that sort of information you've just said is really important, but you've been involved in developing eco bricks, haven't you, and rainwater systems. I mean, when does your sort of ingenuity stop?
It's like I'm in villages where there's loads of rubbish, and it's like, well, okay, what can you do with the rubbish? They're either burning it or throwing it in a river. That's not a good idea. Let's build with it. So I built schools and restaurants and health centres and benches. And so I then turned the rubbish into a brick and started to build with it. And the water systems, it's like people have got to stop drinking the stream water because it's so contaminated, and they live in the rainforest, but nobody had ever drunk the rain. So I developed the first kind of rainwater catchment systems. So, and then back here in the UK, I was also a founder of the Southeast Climate Alliance, because it's like, okay, back here, one of the problems is there's all these little tiny groups doing their little thing, which is great. We are like this mycelial network ourselves, all little nodes doing something, but we need to join together. We need to actually function like nature does. And so the concept here was like, let's create an alliance. And so I started that a couple of years ago. I've now stepped back, and it's been amazing. It's like carried on. There's over 100 organizations in the Southeast Climate Alliance, and we've been having great impact politically and with councils as well. So, it's really just identifying a need and saying, well, for every problem, there's got to be a solution. And what is it?
Yeah, I mean, that idea of alliances, I think, is really important, which is why we've locally got the Enfield Climate Action Forum, because it's a network, it's a coalition, and it's about exchanging information, learning what each other's doing, and that's a really, really powerful thing. I mean, you've been working a lot in Ecuador, but you've now told me that you're no longer going to fly. That is about reducing carbon emissions and so on. And so you're here in the UK, and you've started doing a lot of work. In fact, you've done a lot of work in the UK already, haven't you? You've gone around to various organizations and you've spoken to them. And I gather one speech that you made was, how can one person make a difference? Do you really believe that one person can? I mean, you have, but what message would you give to others who say, well, I'm only one person?
Absolutely. It's like the man that moved a mountain. He moved it by moving one stone at a time. And, it's about us actually, just doing something, anything. If you pick a cigarette butt off of the street that's thrown down, you may have actually saved a turtle's life. Who knows? Every little action does have repercussions. And so to look at the ripple, rather than fighting against an old system, we need to create a new system. So when I talk about how can one person make a difference, it's like we need systemic change. And that's, political. Have you spoken to your MPs and your local councillors? We need legal. Are you signed up as an earth protector? Do you know about ecocide? There's economical. Have you changed your bank so that your money is aligned and not in a high street bank that's investing in fossil fuels? Social, are you a part of a local community group? And individual, are you aware of what you buy? That pound in your pocket, who do you give it to? Do you give it to a local store, or do you give it to Tesco? Actually all of these individual, social, economical, political and legal, they're all strands that we can all have a part of the change. So absolutely, when we realize that if all of us actually align ourselves with what we want for the future, well, then we can get there. But if we just keep thinking somebody else is going to fix it, it's them, and not look at us, we're just going to stay in the same situation.
Some people say individual change is what is important. Other people say, no, that won't make a difference. Recycling doesn't really save a lot of emissions. It's systematic change we want. But what you're saying is we've got to address the problem on all fronts. And you really believe that, do you?
I don't think there's any other choice. I think that we all need to actually do what's necessary right now. And yes, of course, recycling is a no-brainer, but recycling is not going to save the world, or changing your light bulbs is not going to save the world. It's not going to cut it. So, really, we have to, kind of take it to the next level as well, and start having more conversations with other people, finding ways to engage, and whether that's with your local councillors. And most people have never even spoken to their local, they're against the government, but they've never spoken to their local MP or their local councillor. So this is a way that we can use the information we have to pass it on. And I think that it's that carving away a rock, which seems like immovable, but each one of us that says something, slowly things are changing. I mean, 20 years ago, I was banging on about plastic bags. Well, now it's kind of normal that they don't give out plastic bags. So change does happen. It's just very slow.
Okay, well, we sort of almost come, well, we have come to the end of our 30 minutes and it's gone really fast, and I'm sure we could talk a lot more. But let me finally ask you, if anybody wanted to find out more of what you do, about the campaigns you've been involved in, about the solutions that you've found, about how people could get involved individually or systematically, how would they get in touch with you? Where would they go?
Well, I have two websites. They're not, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to update them very much, but my website, nicolapeel.com, and also my old website, eyesofgaia.com, which has a lot of varied environmental information on it. So both of those sites are really how you can find out a bit more about me.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I mean, I think that's been really interesting because you've done so much work and you've developed and found so many insights about the problems that people face in the rainforest that you didn't know about before, that many of us didn't know about before. You found ways of passing that information on to people so you can increase knowledge about what's happening there, and you've looked at solutions, and you've also thought deeply about how we can address the problem individually and collectively. So I think you've talked a lot about the things that are important that we can do. So thank you for taking part in this interview. I think it's been not just educational, but it's been an interview where we can get inspired to do things together ourselves, and that's really important. And I hope we do another interview sometime again in the future, not distant future, because what you do is so important and the insights you have so valuable. So thank you for doing it, Nicola. And we'll end this interview now.